Is it man or woman? Human or beast? Or something else entirely? Orvar is none of these things, and is all of these things. Placid as a lake in summer, tumultuous as a river in spring. Orvar is everywhere and nowhere, is everyone and is no one. He is the keeper of the lighthouse. She is the helmswoman at sea. It is the kraken, lurking just below the surface of all that you can see, waiting. It is Orvar, and it is everywhere you look. Welcome to the Uncommon Commander. Hello everyone, and welcome again to the Uncommon Commander. My name is Ryan, and I will be your host today. Please allow me to introduce one of the most fluid commanders I've ever seen printed, Orvar, the All-Form. Orvar is a 3/3 legendary creature shapeshifter with Changeling, meaning that it is all creature types at once. It also has, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets one or more other permanents you control, create a token that is a copy of one of those permanents. And when a spell or an ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, create a token that's a copy of target permanent. That second ability is useful at times if Orvar is in the 99, but today we're making Orvar our commander, so the instants and sorceries ability is the part we're going to be focusing on. There are a lot of ways we could go with this, and I've noticed Orvar being a pretty darn good storm commander as he doesn't enable the storm, but does work as a payoff card for it, getting you tons of copies of whatever awesome creature you have on the board. But I just created a storm deck using Bergie, and be sure to check out that video if you're interested in storm decks. I'll be sure to add a card for it to this video and link it in the description below. So I decided instead to hop on the value train with Orvar. I prefer value decks anyway, so this was selfishly an easy decision to make. I began building by looking at cards that would benefit if there were multiple copies of them in play, and then build outward from there. Also of note, today's deck is built on a $100 budget. The day it was created, it cost $99.49. I noticed that the price today is up to $103, so they're going up. I don't know if that means you should buy the cards you want today. I personally follow a general rule of thumb that says if they're older cards, they're probably going to get more expensive, and if they're a part of the set that was just released, they're probably going to get a little less expensive, at least for a bit. Now, without killing any more time, we'll do the most valuable thing that we can do in any value deck. Ramp. We're staying fairly traditional with our ramp today, starting with a bunch of mana rocks. Those are Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Mind Stone, Prismatic Lens, Darksteel Ingot, and Power Stone Shard. Some of these mana rocks are here to give us any of the 5 colors, since we may end up copying some of our opponent's things, and if we do, we're going to want to be able to use any activated abilities they may have. Power Stone Shard is also one to note. If you manage to copy it twice, the Power Stone Shards you control will tap for 3 colorless mana each. That's 9 mana. That's nuts! We also have some ramp that is not mana rocks. Those are the Ritualistic High Tide and the land ramp spells Burnished Heart and Solemn Simulacrum. The Sad Robot in particular is somewhat slow, but fun to copy multiple times. Alright, I know, you didn't click this video to learn how to ramp. You already know how to do that, you smart cookies. What you want to know is how we're going to be copying things with Orvar. So many possibilities, so what did I choose? Well, I chose a bunch of options. Let's start with our copy spells. These spells make copies of copies, which helps create a copy of that copy because we love copies. Did you follow that? Good! We'll start with our instant speed ones. Those are Cackling Counterpart, which also has Flashback, Faded Infatuation, and Supplant Form, which pulls double duty as a mount spell. For sorceries, we have Quasi-Duplicate, which has Jumpstart, Tempt with Reflections, which has our stupid friends written all over it, and Stolen Identity, which has Cipher. When you cast any of these targeting another creature that you control with Orvar in play, you'll get to create 2 copies of that creature, one from the spell's effect, and one from Orvar's ability triggering. Are you guys old enough to have played Diablo 1? Well, I am, and when I played, duplicating items was a huge problem online. I guess that's not really specific to Diablo 1, but still, let's stick to that game. You see, that exploit made it so you could give other people copies of an item that you found, without any cost to you, as you'd still get to keep it. So, in the spirit of duping, I bring you our next set of cards. Exchange. Political trickery and shifting borders let us, air quotes, exchange lands with our opponents. Sure, they'll get our original land, yeah, but we'll keep a copy of it and get one of theirs, effectively ramping us and giving us their colors. Legerdemain lets us exchange a creature or artifact, and shifting loyalties lets us exchange whatever the heck we want. Our creature protection cards will help us copy things as long as we don't need to protect Orvar with them, but instead someone or something else. Those are Essence Flux, Mizium Skin, Rescue, Veil of Secrecy, Ghostly Flicker, and Lost in the Mist. We are kind of verging into removal territory now, but bounce spells are great for letting us protect and reuse our own things, giving us copies of them whenever we target them. Or, alternatively, we can remove our opponent's things from the table and set them back a turn. These bounce spells are Banishing Knack and Retraction Helix, which don't actually require us to bounce our own stuff to get copies, Boomerang, Ether Tradewinds, Capsize, and Reality Strobe. Those last two are highly reusable, which can be nice. Alright, we pretty much talked about some removal cards already in the last section, so let's talk actual removal. Well, maybe not actual removal. Our removal cards in this deck are largely control-based instead of being removal. You'll see what I mean. These control cards are Frogify, Kasmina's Transmutation, Mystic Subdual, and Deep Freeze. These can be copied and put onto more and more of your opponent's creatures. The nice thing about auras is that when they're copied, when they enter the battlefield, they don't target. That means copied auras can be put on creatures with Shroud. Nice. We do have two actual removal spells here, in Hour of Need and Duplicant. Don't be afraid to target one of your own things with Hour of Need. Doing so will allow you to keep your creature and also create a 4/4 Flying Sphinx. Duplicant is also a fun card to bounce. You see, you'll cast him and exile a rad creature. Then you cast a bounce spell on him and get to create a token copy of that rad creature. Then you recast Duplicant and exile something else. With the sheer amount of control this deck is capable of, we're running only 2 board wipes. Feel free to add more if your meta requires it. These board wipes are Scourge of Fleets and Aethergale. The Scourge is another fun card to bounce or flicker, and Aethergale should ideally target 5 of your opponent's creatures and 1 creature that you control with a sweet Enter the Battlefield ability. Well, we've cast our awesome stuff, and now it's time to refill our hand. Betrayal is another fun aura to copy. Our X spells are Mind Spring, Open into Wonder, and Gadwick the Wizened, and are fairly flexible for whatever point of the game you're at. Monastery Siege will help fill our graveyard and our hand, and is linearly better with each copy of it. Paradoxical Outcome will help copy a creature and fill our hands. Muldrifter is a great ETB creature, and Flow of Ideas will draw us a card for each island that we control. Of course, our card advantage wouldn't be complete without some ability to utilize our graveyard. For this, we have Archaeomancer and Shipwrecked Dowser, which is a 5-mana Archaeomancer, but with prowess. I should mention our infinite combo now that I've mentioned the rest of the parts of it. This is the Peregrine Drake, infinite mana, and infinite ETB triggers combo. For this, we need one of Archaeomancer or Shipwrecked Dowser. For this example, we'll use Archaeomancer. We also need Ghostly Flicker and Peregrine Drake. With Archaeomancer and Peregrine Drake on the battlefield, tap 5 lands for mana and cast Ghostly Flicker using 3 of the mana produced, targeting both creatures. When Ghostly Flicker resolves, it goes to the graveyard, and its effect happens, flickering both Peregrine Drake and Archaeomancer. When the 2 creatures re-enter the battlefield, you'll untap all 5 lands, and Archaeomancer can return Ghostly Flicker back to your hand. You'll have gained 2 mana, which is now sitting in your mana pool. Rinse and repeat. Once you've got roughly infinite mana, feel free to target some other creature that isn't Peregrine Drake to create near infinite copies of it, as long as Orvar is in play. In fact, if Orvar is in play here, you'll end up creating infinite mana and can also create infinite Peregrine Drakes and infinite Archaeomancers, which will allow you to reuse all of the instants and sorceries in your graveyard infinitely. You still have to swing your creatures to get the win, but if you'd like to use this as a direct win condition, maybe consider putting Altar of the Brood in the deck. That's not in this deck tech, it's just a suggestion, but it would complete this combo. Moving away from that infinite combo, let's also talk about some other utility cards we have. These are Distortion Strike, Whim of Volrath, which is also high in dollar price at about a quarter of the cost of the deck, but it is low in mana price and is highly reusable, Hidden Strings, and Domineering Will. The potential applications for Domineering Will with this deck are humorous. We also have Confounding Conundrum here. By itself, this spell turns off our opponent's land ramp spells. When copied, it turns land ramp spells into self-land removal spells. This is especially rude when you copy it at instant speed with Whim of Volrath in response to the landfall player casting Splendid Reclamation. Now, on to our land base. We're running the Ramp Land, Myriad Landscape, the Spell Recursion Land, Mystic Sanctuary, and the lands that give us anyone's colors, Exotic Orchard and Thespian Stage. We're also running the Locust Lands, Cloudpost and Glimmerpost. Cloudpost especially is a fun one to copy. We're also running the MDFC, Saloon Vision, to give us an extra spell. If we instead need more mana, it can be put down as a tap land, Saloon Isle. I also decided at some point that running only 7 lands wasn't really good enough for mana production, so to compensate, we're running 29 islands. Well, we've made it through to the final segment of this video. Either I've done an alright job, or you're a very patient person. Maybe both. Either way, thank you. If this is your first time here, I want to welcome you to the final segment, my favorite segment, a segment that I like to call The Final Countdown! Today's Final Countdown is going to be a countdown not of cards, but instead of interactions. I present to you in the very particular order of 5 through 1, my favorite interactions for this deck. What's better than 1 Orvar? 2 Orvars. At number 5, we have the only cards that let us copy our commander, Spark Double and Helm of the Host. As a bonus, Helm of the Host doesn't stop at just 1 copy. And of course, for each copy of Orvar on the battlefield, you'll create an extra copy of whatever other creature you've decided to target with an instant or sorcery. Why yes, I will have a board full of your Grave Titan that I exiled with Duplicant. Thank you. You know what are some of the worst cards in all of Magic the Gathering for the EDH format? Zuberas. I mean, it's a singleton format and there are only 7 of these things in existence. Or are there? Now at number 4, thanks to Orvar's shenanigans, you too can have a field full of Floating Dream Zuberas. It doesn't even take that many of them to be scary. Say you get 2 copies of it and the original on the board at the same time, and someone decides to kill them. Well, they see each other die, and now you draw 9 cards. Oh, did Orvar die at the same time? Well, he's also a Zubera. Draw 12 instead. Number 3 was brought to my attention thanks to Mitch at the Commander's Quarters, and I love it. The card is Coveted Jewel, and the interaction is creating copies of it to draw a ton of cards. This thing really fuels itself here. You see, you'll have to pay the 6 mana originally, but then you can tap it and cast a spell with the mana that it just tapped for, which will create another copy and draw you 3 more cards. You'll tap that copy to pay for the next spell, which you've probably just drawn into, and make another copy. It's not all that hard to get 5 or 6 copies onto the battlefield, and it's possible to draw out most of your deck. Hilariously, when an opponent hits you, they'll claim all of the coveted jewels for themselves. This can be a terrible thing, or it may just cause them to deck themselves. Either way, it's a high-risk, high-reward play, and it's very interactive. I am all about it. Do you remember how our exchange cards worked by us not having to actually give up the creature we were exchanging? Well, number 2 is going back to that old trick. Sudden Substitution can target your own spell and an opponent's creature, but in this deck it tends to work better if you target an opponent's huge win condition spell and one of your own creatures. You'll make a copy of your creature and give the original to your opponent. And then you'll, let's call it repurpose their win condition spell to suit your own needs. And finally, we get to number 1. It begins with the cards Torrential Gearhulk and Scholar of the Lost Trove. It also requires instants and sorcery cards to be in your graveyard. To demonstrate, we'll use the Gearhulk. When it enters the battlefield, we'll use its ETB to cast a spell in our graveyard, targeting the Gearhulk. Thanks to Orvar, the Gearhulk will get copied, and the copy's ETB will allow us to cast another spell from our graveyard for free. We'll just keep doing that until we don't have a graveyard, and do have a battlefield full of Gearhulks. If we have just 4 spells in our graveyard, we'll be spending 6 mana to add 25 power to the battlefield, as we'll have the original Gearhulk and 4 copies. This effect is so powerful, it almost made me reverse course and go with the Storm Mill hybrid deck instead. So if you decide to build that kind of an Orvar deck, don't forget the Gearhulk and its brother sister, Scholar of the Lost Trove. Thank you everyone for checking out today's video. I'd like to welcome you to click the like button if you enjoyed this deck tech, and hit subscribe so you don't miss our future content. Clicking on those buttons helps this channel grow, and I really appreciate that. I'm not just saying that, I do appreciate it. It's easy for me to appreciate that click because there haven't been that many. So with the excellent sales pitch in mind, go ahead and click to your heart's content. But seriously, I appreciate you watching this video. You should be seeing some other videos of mine on your screen right now, or maybe someone else's videos that are also awesome. Don't hesitate to check out their deck techs too. There's a lot of great content in this community. Now then, I'm going to leave you with this simple reminder that imitation is the greatest form of flattery. That's how I know we're all great flatterers. I'll see you next time, you beautiful people.